So does anybody want to start the conversation today about what they derived as the major concept from the first article, kind of, is developmentally play more important than age-appropriate play? Let's start with that one. What you either thought the main concept was, and it's kind of in the title, but also I want to go deeper than that, why, and anybody.
Okay.
Yes, hi, please.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I just wanted to say that for me it was interesting that the title was sort of misleading because the answers seemed to be so obvious that I thought that the article is going to be very simple and it will not be worth reading it almost. And then I started reading. At first I skipped to the second one, and then when I started reading this one, I realized that it was so thought-provoking, and there were so many things that made me realize how important so many aspects of the developmentally appropriate play is, and how many repercussions there are if it's not like that, if you just go with the age-appropriate things. So it made me think about a lot of things about my child, of course. And I was thinking, I always try to encourage the organic development. It would be the ideal way. And I always try to look for the prerequisite skills as well, but it's so difficult. And I actually started wondering if there is, apart from just knowing about the milestones in general, if there are more detailed charts where we can sort of track them to see, like, before this, he should be able to do that. And so,
Right.
like, you know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
I do know what you mean, and you're bringing up great points. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for starting the conversation too. Thank you for being the first one. The thing that I think you said is that it seems obvious, but it's not. Okay, let's
yeah,
start there, right? Because I wrote this, or I put this together from other materials, really, that my father had and that we've written, and things that we were using supporting parents in understanding these concepts. I had to expand on it because so many people think they're already doing it. Yet, then when you think about actually the details, it's more complicated than it actually sounds. And very few children are fully doing it, right? And most children are having access to these toys that aren't just not developmentally appropriate for them, but actually might be detrimental, right? And
yeah,
that's the key, right? And doctors, there's not a doctor I've ever talked to who understands this concept, right? Because they almost all think about it as a skill-based kind of acquisition because medicine is focused on that. But when we really look at what you're saying, like these milestones of development, they're directly correlate with the different types of play. And so as we talk about these different types of play, they actually have to do with a child's progression through the developmental stages, from sensory and emotional regulation and self-regulation to reciprocity and cause and effect, and then coordinating our motor system and our affective systems all together, and creating larger social patterns, and then ideation, creativity, and logic, right? And so the reason why there isn't, I think, a more detailed list of the milestones and what to expect is because it's going to look different for each child, right? And so it'd be hard to specify it so much. Now that we can't do more, right? And I can try to kind of think of a conceptualized version of this and some sort of visual representation of it, right? Because actually I really like that idea, because the more visuals we have, the more we're going to conceptualize this as a group. And so
yeah,
even if we have some sort of like chart or graph that shows the progression of a child with a curve, right? Where the beginning is the sensory motor development, then we have more of the motor planning and sequencing development and reciprocity and patterns, and then we have the creative ideation, logic, language and symbolism. All of those things we can then look at kind of how it all fits together. But the one other thing I want to comment on is that it's also not as concrete as just moving from one to the next, because I know dozens of children who are at that higher symbolic level play, but they're still working on some of that regulatory stuff, right? Where they're needing to move and run around and crash and swing and jump while they are That's why I think steps, but just like everything else, we need to figure out how to apply it adaptively to each child.
Yeah, I think it would also be
But yeah, I
useful
mean,
because
that, go ahead.
like that you can also convince the professionals to go with this kind of because they always like the concrete lists, so they can just check like, okay, kid can do this, kid can do that. If I'm always in fight, you know, against the system, so I'm just trying to see how I can convince them that he did improve, you know, like there are so many things that he can do, even though he can't do alphabet and all this kind of academics that they're expecting him. There are a lot of things that have changed, so I'm trying to
Yeah,
sort of.
so my father had something. Yeah, no, so it says if you do want to put together a visual, I would love to help. Shannon, I appreciate that, and I will talk to you when I'm back. Shannon is one of our wonderful occupational therapists at the Floortime Center, and she is fantastic as a therapist, but also as a professional. So I will take you up on that, Shannon. But you're right. So one resource that is available is years and years ago, and I haven't used this in a while, but my father created something called the social emotional growth chart, and he actually
Mhm,
gave it to Pearson Publishing, who does Bailey's, the Bailey's
mhm,
scales, right? Bailey's assessment. I don't, my dad was an interesting guy like that. Sometimes it would have been nice if we could still use ourselves. but but if you wanted to use something like that, it's a pretty simple checklist, actually. We have a few other tools that we've used internally for some of this stuff. And I actually have kind of a checklist. Again, it's not as binary, it's not as concrete as I think what a lot of people will want. But I actually have a checklist that I can share with the group later on that
mhm,
compares some of the social emotional skills the CDC in the United States uses to identify social emotional growth in a child. It goes through basic skills like pointing and looking and things like that, and I correlate them with the milestones that they apply to. Okay, so it might be continuous the social problem solving, continuous flow, and in one list, and a couple other things, social problem solving, and then on the other side of the list is the CDC skills that kind of correlate with that. The challenge
mhm.
with that is that when people fill that out, and they all fill it out when they start working with us, every child scores higher on the skills than they do on the capacity on the milestones. So even
Mhm,
though the skills are supposed to be
mhm.
part of the milestones, when parents look at the skills, they say, "Oh, my child can do that." Well, when I meet the child, they're not always doing those things.
Mhm.
Hello, hold on 1 second, Syndrome. Um, the so when it's still a tool we can use because I think it's valuable to see that. Unfortunately, when people think about a specific skill, they almost always rate their child higher than when they think about a more general capacity, right? Like engagement.
Mhm.
But when you say, "Does your child look at you?" Yes. But is your child engaged with you? No, right? And
Yeah.
so, and it's those types of differences. So there
Mhm.
isn't a really, again, I'm open to finding better ways to do that, but yes, that is the inherent challenge here. Um, Sundram, did you want to say something? Sorry, I muted you. Okay, if not, let me know. Um, any other thoughts? Anybody?
I also think that when people think of the word skill, they think of something that's teachable and like that more of a top-down approach.
Mhm.
So you see therapists even like getting really fixated on that. And then you start using the like, are you using your listening eyes to try to get eye contact versus actually looking at that underlying sensory system. So I feel like the milestones and the capacities really kind of broaden that and help realize the full picture versus isolating each of those individual skills.
Right. No, absolutely. And some of it just comes also with education too. I mean, if we can provide maybe more information up front to help parents fill some of this stuff out. So when we're talking about skills, well, is this a skill they're showing spontaneously, or is this a skill that they're exhibiting when they're prompted, right? Or taught how to do it, right? Like you're saying, Shannon. So I think all of those things are relevant. I created the list at first to see actually the differences because I be able to identify, hey, they see their child is doing this, but then they're actually not doing the bigger picture thing, the concept, the capacity that's represented, that should be representing that skill. And so, but I think you're right. I think this is all part of kind of educating, parents and professionals. Any other comments or thoughts about this and its importance? Why is it then that kids are why is an article like this, I guess, important? In addition to kind of making sure the child is not engaging in some of the more detrimental self-involvement, what's one of the other Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Are you still there? Hello?
Yep.
You're all still there? Okay, great. Sorry. As anticipated, my internet came. I'm glad you're still here. With the progression of anything, we're looking at developmentally, right? I mean, one of the major concepts of a developmental framework is that you have to progress through these kind of earlier stages and foundational skill sets, however we want to look at it, into the higher ones. And you can't just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? We have to build that foundation and then gradually move up the ladder. And the same is true of play, right? People don't conceptualize All right, everybody. I'm on my phone now. So I hope you all can hear me. This may be a little different, but please just give me a thumbs up or something if you can hear me. Let's see. All right, much better now. Oh, great. Okay, that's great. It may be harder for me to just navigate because it'll be on a smaller device, but I will do my best to answer your questions even on chat. So let's see, what was I saying? Oh yeah, just that with parents. I mean, so many parents and it's not just, and it's not their fault. They're often being told, by the psychologist who, refers them to us and evaluates them, or some other doctor they worked with, like a developmental pediatrician, that they need to teach their child these missing skills, and that they need to put their children around age-appropriate peers. They need to have them in a preschool environment around these toys that are age-appropriate. And so, these ideas or the difficulties in understanding some of these concepts are not, it's not their fault, but we need, as professionals, or for those of you parents here, we need to make sure that we're the ones kind of guiding them in this and educating them, because otherwise, they're going to continue to believe the most kind of logical thing to all of us, that a child's not doing something, let's teach it to them, right? I mean, I thought that way before I learned this framework. I was an educator for many years, and I was teaching kids math in seventh and eighth grade, and they had learning challenges. And I realized actually that so many of the kids in my classes, they didn't have the foundational concepts to understand math. They didn't know. I mean, there was literally a girl in my class in seventh grade who was actually good at math when it was written on the board. 7 minus 3 equals 4, right? She could do that. But when I'd ask her which number is bigger, 73 or 67, she didn't know how to answer that. She could not understand quantity concepts. So she didn't even have the foundation of the concepts of numbers. And so, and yes, and therapists are also not always willing to get on the ground too. So that is often true. We try to look for the ones at our office who really like to get on the floor and roll around. But yeah, so it's going to be up to us to really educate people. And we don't have to really get too far into the second article. I want to be aware of